sort of thing, you'll be able to do that. So I have the distinct pleasure of introducing a longtime acquaintance, friend, and former board member of Literacy Volunteers of Leon County, for which I worked for many years. So I have firsthand experience of Joe's expertise and ability to work with boards, board development, and strategic planning. Joe's a certified trainer and a business consultant. He worked for a long time. Well, first of all, I should say he's a veteran, 21 years in the United States Air Force, followed by 11 years working with the state of Florida, during which he specialized in human resources, as I recall. And then he's also spent 15 years consulting, and he does this kind of thing all the time. He's a great speaker. He knows of what he's talking about. He's lively and dynamic. I really think you're going to enjoy him. And he just speaks from the heart. He has a lot of integrity and concern and compassion for the people he works with and for all these years. So I'm happy to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Joe Keith Jr. Joe?
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you all. That's a rather lengthy bio, and all it serves to prove is that that's not coloring. The gray hair has actually been earned over the years. So Angela and Rhonda, thank you for the opportunity to speak with your folks today. I always enjoy any time that I can help someone do what they do better. And first of all, understand that when we talk about doing what we do better, it's not in any way an indication that what we've been doing is not fantastic or great or hasn't been making the results that we want it to, but it only implies that we are good at what we do and we want to do even better for better results. What I like talking about folks in your situation with is the fact that you got into what you do for a reason, and United Way of the Big Bend and all of its members do a great work here in this area, of which I'm a beneficiary and have been involved with over the years. So I appreciate the opportunity to share with you this afternoon. And so I want to test out this raise your hand thing. We're not going to be able to talk back and forth like I would if I were in the same room with you, but just by show of hands, if you would click the button on the bottom of your screen that says raise hand, if you have any experience at all with strategic planning, whether in your current organization you're representing today, or in another organization where you work or have involvement, how many of you have actually had experience with strategic planning? If you would click on the raise your hand, that'll give us an indication. It looks like we have a big zero, or the system's not working. We're going to assume that we don't have a lot of experience with strategic planning, and so
Joe,
that's great.
Can I interrupt just for 1
Yeah.
second? Are you looking, if you look under the participant list, Mandy has a hand raised.
Oh, I see one hand over there. There you go.
It's not going to show up on the screen for you, so you kind of got to monitor that a little bit.
All right. Well, Mandy, thank you for that. Hopefully, when I step wrong, you can be able to bring us back. So fantastic. So we have one person who has done some strategic planning. Thank you, Mandy. And we're going to continue that today. First of all, by looking at that term strategic planning, and depending on your involvement, which it doesn't look like we have a lot, this may be new material to you, but I'm going to tell you a little secret before we get started. All of you have done strategic planning and do strategic planning. Those of you who are representing faith-based groups, you started doing strategic planning when you saw the need. Those of you who have social service type organizations, you started doing strategic planning either when you started the organization or when someone began to explain to you the work of what we do. And strategic planning, in its simplest terms, is nothing more than the organization taking a look at what we do, finding out what challenges, obstacles they face in doing what we do, and how we are going to capitalize or take over those obstacles and challenges in such a way that we can do what we do to the best degree that we want, to achieve the results that we want and beyond. And with strategic planning, we try to do it in near term and long term. And you'll read different books that recommend anywhere from 3 to 5 years. I'm going to recommend that you try not to look seriously at more than 5 years, because your strategic planning becomes more of a wish list after that point. 3 to 5 years tends to be ideal because you have time to put your plans into place and check them as you go along. So you'll find different things of that, but if you write down 3 to 5 years is ideal. that will benefit you greatly. And it also prevents you from this overwhelming task of trying to chart a path for the next 20 years. Now, it doesn't mean you won't be doing strategic planning for 20 years. It just means that ideally you're going to focus and get the results that you want in the next 3 to 5 years. And that tends to be ideal. There are organizations that update their strategic plan every year. I'm not a big fan of annual updates because then it becomes just a more of an episodic event. I like strategic planning to become what we do, and I like for changes to the strategic plan to be driven by the environment, by the nature of the business, or by specific changes and challenges, which could happen because technology advances and you could have to do it quicker than a year, or which happens because the nature of our audience, our client service list changes, different other factors. But if it is not driven by changes in the environment, it's probably not time to change the strategic plan. So today we're going to introduce this topic of strategic planning and see if we can all get some agreement. I don't know how many of you are readers. I happen to be a lifelong reader. One of the great authors that we have known over the years is a guy named Lewis Carroll, and he wrote this profound exchange between two of his characters way back in 1872. Lewis Carroll said this in the book Through the Looking Glass. You're familiar with Alice in Wonderland and the Cheshire Cat. Alice says, "Which way should I go?" And the cat says, "That depends on where you're going." Alice responds, "I don't know where I'm going." And so the cat looks at her and says, "Well, then it doesn't really matter." And this is the essence of why strategic planning is so important. If we have not figured out where the organization is going, what we are trying to do, who we want to serve, how we want to serve them, and what does that service entail, then it really doesn't matter what we do. We show up every day to get whatever done. But with strategic planning, we actually borrow this term from the military. As you heard, I have 21 years in the military, so I actually began my strategic planning experience with the United States Air Force and taught many levels of the United States Air Force strategic planning. But that term strategy does have a military connotation. That's when the military looks at the objective, whether it's defeating an enemy or correcting an error or something, and the military then begins to lay out specific plans for how we are going to achieve that objective. And throughout the military, we have complete departments that do nothing but plan. And our strategic plans actually are designed to give us the advantage in the war zone. That's the number one advantage of strategic planning. And so tell you a little bit war story there. I won't tell you many because I have hundreds. But when I first got into strategic planning, I would happen to be in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. And there's a space there that's called part of the military special operation forces. You've heard of things like Green Berets and paratroopers and those guys who go in and do weird things at night. Nobody knows they were there. Well, I was a part of that organization. And they called me one day and they said, "We've got a commanding officer who actually commands a helicopter flying unit, and they go in with helicopters and they destroy things. And he doesn't feel strategic planning and what we were part of total quality management was for him. And he was a pretty tough nut to crack. Nobody could get his attention. Plus, he was in a position and he was a high enough rank that he didn't feel like he really had to listen to other people. And so I was not near that rank, but I was the expert in this area. So they said, "Can you go over and talk to him and get him to see the benefit of it for his unit?" And so I had studied his unit, I looked at the numbers, and then I went over and I had a meeting with him. And the meeting went very well. We sat down to talk and he said, "Look, let me tell you before you get started, I get paid to kill people. That's what I do. And I don't need total quality management, strategic planning, or any of that quality fluff stuff that you have to help me kill people." I said, "Sir, that's exactly why I'm here. And that's exactly what we want to do. You do get paid to kill people. However, you use a weapon system that we call an airframe, a helicopter, and that helicopter has armaments on it. And you have a resource that's very valuable within that helicopter called personnel. We want to put all those things together so that you can do that mission more effectively." And the way I look at it, if total quality management, strategic planning can help you increase your lethality and reduce your resources, is it not worth listening? Well, he finally sat up and actually looked me in the eyes. I said, "Yes, sir. If you use this, it's going to show you how to kill more people with less bullets." Then we had his attention and we were able to sit down and talk. And that's really what we're looking at. Hopefully none of your organizations are involved in such a serious process, but what you do is serious, and what you do is valuable, and what you do is beneficial to the area that you serve. And so we want to look at that. We also must look at what options we have to do what you do. And that's where strategic planning takes on an active part in what you do. You have to decide what's most important to your success, and then you pursue that, and you pursue that with a plan that is most likely able to give you success at it. So prior to today, your organization has existed and you've done great things. Doesn't mean that we are, see here, adding a helicopter to my, exactly. So we are going to look at what we look and what we might face. So we're going to talk about some of this you've already been doing, and hopefully I'll be able to illustrate that. It does not require that you put together a glossy, trifold, colorful brochure that you can put on your coffee table to be a strategic plan. For organizations of the nature that I understand yours are, what I really recommend that you have is about a 5x8 or 8x5 cardstock, larger note card, or we call them flashcard, but yours would be a little bit bigger. And I think most of your strategic plan would be in that size and in your own writing, that you would keep it with you at all times. Every meeting you attend, every time you talk to donors, anytime you're interacting with stakeholders, you would have your strategic plan there. And I think that would suit your purposes ideally, but we'll get more into that. Because most of you started elements of your strategic plan when you began to see that you could do this or you could do that and make a difference in a meaningful way. And that was probably the genesis of when you got involved in the organization. Either you created it. I understand some of you may have actually created your organization from the ground up. Some of you may have joined an existing organization and now you've taken it to new heights. So what is it that we keep saying? What's this term, strategic planning? Your plan was start to put in place when you saw the need in the area that you're now working in. And you saw a possible way to meet that need. That was probably the genesis of a strategic plan. So we have a tool at our disposal that we have paid lots of money for professionals to go into, professional athletes, and teach them this tool. And it's a tool that you probably have done and not realized you were doing it. I don't know how many of you have ever heard the term mental imaging. Mental imaging is a great place and process to start your strategic planning process. In simple terms, what they do with professional athletes is they take the athlete and they put them in a room with an expert, and they ask the athlete to see them executing their play, either on the court or on the field, depending if it's basketball, football, whatever. And all the sports teams use this. And the athlete is asked to see themselves executing the play. Then they're asked to do it again, seeing themselves executing the play flawlessly. Then they ask them to look at it in terms of who they believe, which other teams out there are their most starch competitor, who has the best likelihood of beating them. But they want the athlete to see them defeating the other team. They want the athlete to see himself or herself executing the play perfectly and getting to the goal line, making the shot, achieving the objective. And they want them to do this over and over again until that's what they see. When they go into their mental imaging process, they see themselves coming out victoriously. And that's really what it is when we strategically plan. We see our organization executing a plan and executing it flawlessly so that we increase our stakeholder commitment, we increase our donations, we increase our ability to serve, but we have multiple success stories. We see the organization meeting the need. And so mental imaging is a good place to start. What do you see as the most critical need for your organization? And then you want to capture that by writing it down. You don't have to type it up. You don't have to have a formal plan. And then you ask yourself, well, that's probably a good start, but why would I spend my time? I've got so much to do. And I know everyone on this meeting today, it might have been difficult for you to even carve out an hour to spend this time talking to us about strategic planning, let alone dedicating time, energy, effort, and resources to strategic planning. Well, good news is you've already done a lot of it. The better news is it doesn't take a lot of time. You don't have to have a lot of formal processes. I have been paid very handsomely as a consultant at times to go into a larger organization and spend days with them. But it doesn't have to work that way. I was working for the state of Florida at an agency, and I went in and I made a lot of changes fast because the agency was hurting. And we made some great progress. And I was called in as basically a consultant internal, meaning I was an employee of the organization, made a lot of changes, and then they asked me to stay around and become the chief of human resources, which I was glad to do. It was a great job. We had fun. Well, in state government, things move around. And so the secretary, which is the chief executive of that agency, moved to another agency. And I don't think she was gone probably a week before she calls begging, is there any way you can help me? Come help me. She said, this organization that I am now, they've been working on their strategic plan for 3 years and they haven't even got it started. They don't even have a mission statement yet. And she said, it can't be right. She said, that's not the way you taught us. I said, well, it seems a bit excessive. She said, well, how long do you think it would take us to do a strategic plan? I said, well, number of people you got, I think if you can give me 2 hours with your senior leadership, we can write the mission statement. She said, no, they're telling us it's going to take another 6 months. I said, well, you can if you want, but there's no reason for that. I said, I'll tell you what, let's plan on a session with 2 hours and then let's plan on a follow-up session. Short end of the story, we did one session in 90 minutes. We had the basic of the mission statement. I asked everybody to take it back with them and we were going to meet the next week and for another 2 hours and iron it out and find it out. We met the next week, 30 minutes, we ironed it out. So essentially in a total of 2 hours, 90 minutes the first time, 30 minutes the second time, we had what they thought would take 6 months to do. So when you make it that long and drawn out, all you're doing is hurting yourself and you are expending a lot of resources. So I think this is something that you can do because you have the capability really by yourself. It's also a misnomer with other folks who talk about strategic planning. For most of you at organizations of your size, you don't have to have every person in the organization involved in the strategic planning process. For the most part, 90% of the strategic plan is in your heart. It's the passion that you bring to what you do. You'll formalize it by sitting down and thinking about the things that we talk about today. And then for that last 10%, you share it with your stakeholders and get their reaction and you refine it. So it doesn't have to be very complicated. So why you should do it is because it's going to benefit you. I've got 3 specific reasons I'd like you to note under why I believe you should do strategic planning. First of all, because your time is valuable and you need to stop reinventing the wheel at every opportunity. Sometimes we get very familiar with a military term called OBE, or overcome by events. When managers or senior leaders or executives in the positions that you're in are constantly running around being overcome by events, I say that they have changed their job description. You're really unpaid firefighters because all you do is run around putting out fires. And a person that finds himself doing that really would benefit from having a strategic plan. Your time is so important. We need to have a plan for how we're going to handle things. So a well-constructed strategic plan that is written in some form, whether it's on a note card, whether it's typed in a computer, doesn't have to be lengthy, but it provides a consistency of purpose so that everybody understands who we are, what we do, why we do it, and who we do it for. If we can understand those things, who we are, what we do, why we do it, and who we do it for, this will help to get us on track and keep us on track. And it provides a consistency of purpose and a message. And this message, this consistency guides us. As we do it, it guides all of our stakeholders, volunteers, employees, board members, everybody can sign on to the same purpose. Secondly, I believe we should do strategic planning in organizations like yours because everyone involved needs to know what true north is for the organization. What I mean by that is if you've ever used a compass, you understand that the needle is always facing north. Now that can be altered if you have it anywhere near a magnetic device or a metal device because the compass can get off. So that's why we refer to true north. True north actually dictates where we're headed. That's what we're about. And so for your organizations, we need to make sure we have captured what is the most important function that we have, why we exist, and all of us agree. I can't tell you the number of times I have gone in to consult with organizations. I have been on the assessment team from, we used to do CHS, we go out and do the assessments for the donations. And we would have conflicting objectives. We'd have people working against themselves because they hadn't ironed out. These are senior people, members of the board, boards and executive directors who are actually at cross odds for different purposes. And so they couldn't move forward because they didn't have clarity of purpose. But when we have a strategic plan, everyone involved understands why we exist and what our true north is. Secondly, or thirdly, because your success depends on convincing others to share your vision, a strategic plan becomes critical. When you have an opportunity to add stakeholders, when you have an opportunity to increase donations, when you have an opportunity to get volunteers, when you have an opportunity to get client services, it helps if you can lay out and articulate a clear, consistent objective in your strategic plan that they can see your vision. Then they can sign on. It gives them something to agree with you on. And so those are the reasons I think that you should spend time strategic planning. It's valuable to you to save you the monumental amount of time. It's valuable to you because everyone needs to be on the same sheet of music and have the same true north. And it's valuable because it helps you convince others in the validity of your vision. Nextly, what do I do with the completed strategic plan? So Joe, if I sit down and I jot these notes on a card, or I type them up in a computer, or I put them up on a whiteboard, however you do it, make a PowerPoint, what do I do with it? Well, this is absolutely critical, and it is the most difficult part of strategic planning. So if you have a pen or a pencil or a crayon, I would recommend that you write these down, because this is why we do strategic planning. But if we've done all the work and we don't do this, then we've wasted the time. So the first reason why, or the first thing that you must do with your strategic plan, is you must live it consistently. When we get together and we say, this is what we do, or we sit down in the privacy of our own office or favorite spot to think, and we come up with, this is why I became a member of this organization, or this is why I started this organization, or this is the ministry that our faith-based organization wants to meet. When we understand that, we need to make sure that we are consistently reminded of what that is. So we live it daily. We are always about that. I know a person here who runs a local radio station in town. We call it local, but they're growing. They're actually branching out through North Florida and South Georgia. But whenever you meet this person that I know, the owner of the radio station, it can be night or day. You could be in a grocery store. It could be in a concert. It could be at a worship service. It could be at the gas station. He is going to talk about the radio station. He is going to talk about the work that the radio station is doing. And so you always know when you meet this person, that subject is going to come up. I don't know if you're going to take it to that extreme, but all of your efforts, and particularly your involvement, interaction with other organizations, your involvement, interaction with members of the community, they see the organization when they see you, and you share it. You can't be a silent fan. You have the strategic plan, and that's another reason why I think the note card becomes so effective, because if you have it written down at every opportunity, you get to share it, you get to reinforce it, because at the last time I saw you, it was important. I see you 6 months later, it still needs to be important, but the message needs to be consistent. So that's why you would have that strategic plan with you. And you begin to expect it. You expect others, you expect it to resonate. And so if people begin to repeat it back to you, you know it's resonating, you know they're getting on board. And this would be your stakeholders. So we have to make sure that all the people who are involved in the organization understand the strategic plan. So let's say this happened. We call a meeting today, and you all come in, I'm on the board, I walk in and I say, bonjour, comment allez-vous? Oh, vous parlez français? Ne parle pas français. Mon mère, mon père parlait pas anglais. Mon grand-mère, mon grand-père parle français. Mon mère, mon père attendait à l'école, parlait anglais. So by show of hands, raise your, how many of you understood that brief dialogue? I am not seeing any hands coming up. Okay, so Angela and Rhonda speak a little French. I knew Rhonda did, and Annie also speaks French. But if there's only 3 of us out of 14 that actually understand French, what we have is a failure to communicate. And so that's why we need to have a strategic plan, so that we're all communicating the same message, a consistent message, a message that gets the point across. So if we have the strategic plan, we have it with us at all times, we're living it, we're embodying it, we're sharing the same message, what can we expect to happen? As a minimum, we expect to increase our commitment from every stakeholder, because they begin to, it's contagious. when a leader or executive of an organization can embody the principles that have been spelled out in the strategic plan. In other words, if I see the pretty wall chart, if I see the card, if I see the pretty poster on the wall, but yet when I meet people in the organization, I see them living it. I see them executing. I see clients being served to that degree with those principles in mind, then we can all expect to see it happen, and it becomes reinforced and it becomes contagious. So what could happen is we could exceed our own expectations. We could be more successful than we wanted. We could have more donations than we expected. It's a great thing to have a board meeting to decide what to do with the excess funds which have came in because somebody else became convinced of our vision and they made a larger donation. So it's a great thing to have to figure out what we're going to do with the extra volunteers. Whoever had extra volunteers, right? But the additional volunteers who showed up because somebody who was a stakeholder has been able to carry the message of our strategic plan and somebody else has been convinced to come on board. So the things that could happen are that we could do what we do better. We could do it for more clients. We could do it at a better success rate. Ultimately, if what happens is something other than we consider, then it's a great opportunity to readdress our strategic plan. I have seen the strategic plan become so contagious and people become so good at what they do that it actually opens up additional avenues of different lines of business, different opportunities to serve the community. So a fair warning to you, sometimes the best reward for great work is more work. But in our business and what you do, that would be a good thing if more people came to you because they see in you somebody who lives up to what your strategic plan is. And so that brings me to who then should we share the strategic plan with? Who should see the strategic plan? And simply put, it's everyone. First of all, you should see it so that you have it in front of you. More importantly, you should share it with all the stakeholders. Volunteers, employees should see it. They should know it because it gives them an idea of what to expect. And a beautiful thing with internal stakeholders is when we face a crossroads, when there is a difficult decision to be made, when there is a choice to be made that we'd rather not make, the best guidance on which way to go is often found in an effective and current strategic plan where the organization has said, this is what we're about, this is who we serve, and this is how we do it. Often the questions with these dilemmas can be answered just by referring back to the strategic plan. And it's a beautiful thing if we don't have to go and find the executive director, if we don't have to go and find the president of the board to see which way, because we all know the strategic plan and it's been communicated. Also, we must share the strategic plan with external stakeholders. Now, who are our external stakeholders? First of all, it's people who are in like organizations, people who do similar things. If I effectively share my strategic plan with similar organizations, then we are able to reciprocate and serve one another. Sometimes they find out something that they know has helped them would also help me. Sometimes they see a client that can't be served, but they know because of our strategic plan, that's what we do and that we're pretty good at it, and vice versa. And ultimately, when we find folks who are willing to commit to being a blessing to our organization or other organizations, we find people who are willing to give their resources, then we can get referrals this way. And they are not concerned when they make a referral of how that donor or how that stakeholder is going to be received because they know that we live our strategic plan. We don't make it up as we go along, but we have a well thought out plan. We have looked at down the road in the next 3 to 5 years. We know what the objectives are. We know the potential obstacles, and we have a plan for overcoming them. We know who our client base is. We have a plan for serving them. We know what our resources are. We have a plan for effectively using and managing and being good stewards of those resources. And all of this is evidence from a good strategic plan. So what is actually strategic planning? The process, the first thing that should happen in strategic planning is what we call visioning. This is when we sit down and we look at. And so when I take a CEO of a large organization or a high dollar organization, and I get them to start it, before we meet with the board, before we meet with the vice president, before we meet with anybody else, it's me and the CEO alone. And so it would be you and I, one-on-one. It doesn't matter whether your organization is a one-person organization and you do all the work, or it's just you and 3 to 5 to 10 other volunteers. I still want to sit down with you. And I would say, when you first thought there is a need, or when you first thought that's a great organization. I need to become a part, or I could run that organization. After that, what were your next thoughts? Whatever your next thoughts were, probably is the bulk of your vision. When I saw XYZ that say helps homeless veterans, maybe I thought there is a way to help those veterans get shelter, get a regular and recurring source for groceries, get regular health care. And I think I am the one to do that. So if I took those thoughts that I had just because I realized this organization existed, maybe I heard the executive director had just left, maybe I heard somebody wanting to start, whatever it was, immediately I began to see the potential of the organization. My next thoughts after that become the vision. And so when you work on that, you can refine that vision. So you do the vision, then you look at who you want to serve, who it's for. You identify those, and you have to be definitive in identifying who you want to serve, because everybody that has joined the session, all of us on here today, we want to save the world, but we don't have the resources to do that. So who is our target audience? We want to be very definitive about that. And when we get to know each other, we then don't feel so bad about those who we can't serve, because I always know somebody else who can meet the need if I can't meet it, if my organization is not set up for it, if that's not part of our target audience. So very clear part after visioning is setting up our client base, our target audience, who we're going to serve. We do a similar process for stakeholders. Who can be donors? Who would feel the passion that we feel about this, but has resources to lend to it, whether they have a facility, whether they have real estate, whether they have funds, whether they have experience. Are they willing to roll up their sleeves and be a worker? Are they willing to lend their intellectual capacity and be a member of the board? We start to identify folks who do that, because I'm going to be looking next for, do I need any special skills? Do I need certain licenses? Do I need people with a background in certain areas? We begin to identify those. And then, do I need a strategic planning expert? Well, even though I am one, or I are one, I would say for the most part, you don't. There are so many books out there that are fantastic. You can actually Google and get pretty good articles. If you are a reader, if you are a person who would on the next weekend take a couple of days and go through a good book, I'll recommend only one. I have a full library, but this book is as old as I am, probably. I'm not sure. It's probably not quite that old, but anyway, it's been around for more than 30 years. It's called Applied Strategic Planning. Let's see, it's not going to let me show it to you, but it's Applied Strategic Planning. The authors are Goodstein, Nolan, and Pfeiffer. Applied Strategic Planning. It's straightforward, it's textbook, and it gives you some simple, straightforward steps to follow. But you don't need a book, you don't need a class, and you definitely don't need to pay my fees for me to come into your organization and do this with you. You need to roll up your sleeves and understand you may not get it exactly right the first time. But as you go through the process and understand that you never have a finished plan, but you're always involved in strategic planning. You set up a vision and goal for 3 to 5 years, and then you address it as you're required to address it because of changes in the environment, because of changes in the client base, because of changes in other things. Then it's time to update your plan. You will get it better and better and better each time. And it does not have to be painful. It can be very insightful. How long does it take? There's really not a good answer to the question, depending on the size of your organization. As that group I shared with you, state agency full of experts, and this was a medical agency, so they had a lot of doctors and nurses and professionals in this organization. When I look back on it, that was probably one of the problems. They were trying to take their usual approach to things, and government moves at a snail's pace generally anyway. They wanted to take 6 months just to do the vision statement, which meant that they wouldn't have a strategic plan for probably a year and a half at that point. I believe that today is Thursday. You're taking the seminar. Hopefully you set a couple of notes. Maybe I'm going to say something that might resonate with you. If you seriously think about it and you had a couple of hours tomorrow and 4 hours on Saturday, Sunday night, you could be looking at a finished strategic plan. You could have a beautiful 5x8 postcard or cardstock card with notes on it that lay out what your vision is, who you do it for, what are the obstacles to you doing it, how are you planning to overcome those, and some specific goals over the next 3 to 5 years. And under each of those, you would have at least one objective, usually 3 objectives per goal. This is how we're going to do it. And Monday morning, you start making that happen. You would have the genesis of a good strategic plan. So how long does it take to get started? It only takes your next breath. To take serious action, a couple of hours. To do it regularly, it's something that you have to look at. As you communicate it initially, people are going to give you feedback on it. Take that feedback seriously. Start internally, share it carefully externally, take the feedback and refine it. Why is a strategic plan fluid? It is fluid because it is a living document. It feeds your organization. It directs your organization. It directs your activity. It directs your function. And so it's fluid because in this day and age, with people, with technology, with pandemics, with all the other things we're facing, we have to be fluid because we at all times want to continue to pursue the vision that we had when we decided to either start the organization or join the organization. So having a strategic plan is absolutely critical. I will tell you that one of the things that really had high marks for me as an evaluator when I would go out on United Way or CHSP's assessment, when an organization could clearly articulate its mission, vision, goals, and objectives, when an organization could clearly tell us who they were, who they wanted to serve, and how they were going to make that happen, it was really effective. And I have never seen any organization being able to do it unless they had some sort of plan. Those who back in those days actually had started strategic planning were always a step ahead of the rest. And we have limited dollars, we have limited resources to share. And so the strategic plan is a critical step to being able to capture the passion of those who make the decisions on where the dollars go. And the strategic plan gives you that element of consistency. Most of you are very passionate about what you do, and you do a great job of telling your story. What may suffer is your consistency if it's not written down. And so you may, how many times have you left somebody who had the potential to become a stakeholder and you thought, I should have told them this, or why didn't I remember to tell them that? Again, if you have that strategic plan, you reduce those type of reactions. You have a chance to really get those stakeholders on board. Is the strategic plan internal, external? Yes and yes, but it's the same plan. I have seen organizations who try to have an internal strategic plan and an external, particularly nonprofits or faith-based group, because we think our donors or contributors or volunteers want to hear one message, and our people who work and roll up their sleeves need to hear a different message. And that's not necessarily true. What's true is that all of them need to hear the same message, and they need to see the same passion. They need to share the same vision. They need to know the defined client audience. And so your strategic plan is for both your internal and your external stakeholders. It is definitely a decision-making tool, as I alluded to earlier. When we are all on board, we know our true north, we know what the organization stands for, then it's very easy to make a decision as things change, as surprises come, as incidents come. And so we have unruly clients, we have clients whose needs have changed very quickly for us to determine they no longer fit our client base based on what's in our strategic plan. So it's very much part of a decision-making tool. But probably the chief benefit is it clarifies purpose. For everyone involved, it clarifies purpose. And so when we have a strategic plan that benefits us, a strategic plan that is talked about regularly and routinely, a strategic plan that every member of the organization is acquainted with, then we all should have a clear purpose. When I was called into the first state agency where I met the lady that I talked about a minute ago, I was actually working at another agency, and I was happy, they were happy with me. And the governors changed, and when the governors appointed this lady as secretary of the first organization, she came into the organization and she wanted to make changes. She wanted to grab the world by the tail and really revolutionize the organization. She quickly learned there are a lot of constraints within government, and she wasn't able to do what she wanted to do. And so what she did was she tried to figure out how she could invest in the people, because she couldn't give raises at will. She couldn't go through and say, this person's been working hard, they need a raises. State government doesn't work that way. So she asked, well, can I train them? And they said, well, we had a governor before the last governor that cut out all the training slots, but if you could train them, then you could invest in them and you would increase their skills. Increasing their skills, they ultimately would be qualified for promotion, and so that would be a way. So she said, well, we need a trainer. Who can we train? And they said, well, we don't really have anybody in the organization. She asked the governor's office. They said, well, there's a guy that we know in another state agency. He'd probably be willing to consult with you and show you how to do it. He's pretty good at it. So they called me and I went over for a 45-minute scheduled meeting to talk about how they could do it. One thing led to another. And they said, well, what do you think? I got a tour of the organization. I'd never been there, didn't even know the organization existed. Got a tour, walked through the facility. And then we went back to the office and chief of staff is saying, so what do you think? I said, well, first of all, I need to know, do you all have thick skin or thin skin? Because I can pat you on the back and tell you you're doing a good job, you'll get there, or I can tell you the truth. He said, no, we want the truth. We want the truth. So I said, well, you actually insult every one of your employees every day when they come through the building. They looked at me like, whoa, what are you talking about? I said, well, when you walk in the front door, you have these big, beautiful signs, 3 of them on the wall just past the door. And it says, your employee of the month, employee of the quarter, and employee of the year. And everybody's name and picture that's up there is 3 years old or older. The newest one is 3 years old. So what you're really saying is every day when somebody walks in who works here, that nobody in this organization has done anything worthy of recognition in the last 3 years. Whoa, that's not the message you want to send quite naturally. So what does it have to do with strategic planning? Your strategic planning needs to clarify that this is what we do now. This is our business now. This is what we do now. These are our clients now. This is what we need now. These are the objectives that we see now, because these are the obstacles that hinder us being able to serve our clients. So it needs to always be current. It clarifies our purpose. It also lists our priorities. These are the things we want to do. And if resources get tight, we want to do them in this particular order. Very great purpose of the strategic plan is it very well communicates to our potential donors and potential stakeholders what we do. This may be the tool that entices people to come and join the effort. It communicates to our potential clients, our current clients. Clients know that this is the services, these are the services we provide, why we provide them, why our heart's in it. And others may come and get the same services, but also it communicates to staff and volunteers exactly what we're about. So you sit down, you do this weekend, and you have a strategic plan. Now what? You go forth and you begin to do good. You do what you do the way that you want it done. You realize that you're achieving the objectives that you forecasted and even more, because this becomes contagious, so more people get on board. You will no longer be stymied or set aside or frustrated by changing budgets, environments, and clientele, because part of the potential obstacles you address were, if we get the full budget, this is what we do. If we get less, if we have higher priority needs come, we're going to have a plan. So we don't have to go running to a meeting every time something happens and say, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. When something begins to change, we look at our strategic plan, or we remember our strategic plan, and we say, we said if this had happened, this is what we would do. So you quickly orientate new board members, staff members, volunteers, all stakeholders. When people come on board, you know that they get the same clear, consistent message because they're getting the same strategic plan that you have. It also helps you formulate public information on a consistent basis with the same message, so that all the people that you want to communicate to are getting the same message. And so strategic planning is essential. It's never wasted effort. It needs to be done so that you have a clear, consistent message for everyone who is important to your organization. And so with that, I will say that I'm ready for questions or dialogue, however we want to approach it.
Thank you, Joe. If people want to raise their hand, we can unmute you. I believe, Angela, that's right.
Yes.
And or they can put them in the Q&A and we can read them.
That's correct on both accounts, Rhonda.
Good to know I'm correct on something.
Yeah, you got it. I don't see any questions coming up. Joe, you were very thorough.
Great. So let's do this so I can make sure that everybody's working. You know, as a longtime trainer, if you don't ask me a question, I'm going to ask you a question. So if you're shy, just tell me, but I'm going to start with Mandy. Could you tell me your organization? If you would unmute your mic, Mandy.
Hey, this is Mandy Bianchi. I'm with Ability First.
Ability First, fantastic. I'm very familiar with your organization. And do you already have a strategic plan?
Yes, but we're revamping that.
Okay, so I understood that you have one, but then I didn't understand the second part.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said that we are revamping it.
Okay, excellent, excellent. No time wasted for that. Thank you for sharing that, Mandy.
Sure.
Okay. Now I'm going to go to, I see a proctor on here. Proctors are close to me. So Betty, are you still with us, Betty?
I am.
Which organization are you with, and do you have a strategic plan?
I am with Motivating People Through Arts and Crafts. Yes, and we do have a strategic plan that we are going to be revising it for this year.
Excellent. And so do you do a regular, you said for this year, do you do it on a regular every 2, 3, 4 years?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Just to make sure that we're meeting our goals and also our clients' needs.
Excellent. So it's also a time to check up to see how you've done based on where you did the last plan?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Excellent. Great work. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right. Diana, if you're not too afraid, I'm coming your way. Diana, is it Bixler? Which organization are you with, and do you have a strategic plan? Okay, I'm not hearing back from Diana.
She says she's unable to unmute at this time.
Yeah, this is from LaShondra. She has a question. So did you get her question?
I see
LaShondra says
LaShondra. Let me see. It looks like somebody dropped, but LaShondra is still available. So I'm going to ask her to unmute and we can address her question. The question is, what is the difference between real-time and issue-based strategic planning?
Hi, can you hear me?
yes,
Yes.
ma'am, we can.
Oh, okay, good. Yes, I'm LaShondra Williams with Uplift Community Outreach in Tallahassee, Florida. And I was just, we have a strategic planning, but we're in the middle of revamping our strategic planning. And so I wanted to know the difference between a real-time and an issue-based strategy.
Well, they're not actually the same. Real-time strategic planning really just means that we probably on a regular basis at our regular meeting, whether it's the board meeting, staff meeting, whatever, we take up the strategic plan and we make modifications or adjustments as necessary. And the second one that you asked is more of what seems to be more effective. This is where we don't have a time-focused strategic planning effort where we do it every 3 years or every 4 years. But as issues come up that were not addressed in our strategic plan, then we address them in the planning, the same process. So we get used to it. It would say, let something happen with our client base. We either had a large influx of new potential clients in the area, or some federal law, state law may have changed, affecting our clients, whatever. That's an issue that we probably did not look at when we looked at our potential obstacles when we first laid out our goals and objectives. So that issue base would then force us to readdress it. Very critical on the issue base to make sure that we understand not every change requires a change to our strategic plan. We can a lot of times do well by acknowledging that we've looked at it, and while it is a significant change to the client base or the process or what have you, it does not change our strategic plan. I've seen this happen like following a natural disaster or hurricane or something. We may have to temporarily relocate or what have you, but it doesn't necessarily mean we change our strategic plan, because that's a temporary, hopefully a temporary situation, and we'll go back to normal. So the issue-based tends to be more effective because it allows us to remember that strategic planning is an ongoing, continuous process, where the time focus, where we do it every so many years or what have you, strategic planning can in those organizations be pushed to the back burner when it's not time to address the strategic plan.
Thank you. You answered my question. That was great information. And you gave me clarity on which direction that we need to go in regards to the issue-based, when you mentioned the time frame over the years, and then with the real time. So that gave me the direction that we need to go in. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, looks like I ran them all off when I started asking questions.
Well, we were trying to do a lunch and learn, so some of them may have like had to swoop back into something else,
Great.
but I wanted to just, for those who are still here and for Angela and I, tell you how much we appreciated your time, Joe. And I had a couple of questions, but
Okay.
What I might do is try and do a Q&A and then send it to people later where like what's the role of like looking at your budget and how you do your budget? Because I think a lot of times the strategic plan, this idea of where we want to go and how we want to get there and that sort of thing, you have to have the resources. And how does that factor in? What's that component in the strategic planning process? So I think that maybe food for another lunch and learn session or something like that. Resource, not only just in terms of like big fundraising endeavors, but like resources in terms of how does that work within that strategic plan? So maybe you and I could talk about how we might look at
Right.
addressing that.
Right, because for these folks, that becomes critical, and the budget should always be a central part of the strategic plan. And we need to look at whether we're expending the current resources, not just dollars, but other resources effectively. And we, when we first got to LVLC, they had some traditional fundraisers that they had done over and over and over. And unfortunately, those events, those fundraising efforts became kind of traditional and that they enjoyed doing them, but they weren't very high return. There was a lot of effort for very little return. And so the board and the executive director need to recognize that. And they weren't doing a lot of actually reaching out to other people or trying to grow donors, introduce your message to people who have the potential. And so at that board, we spent a lot of time and energy on people who did not have the wherewithal to contribute what we needed to operate. So we had to make some adjustments there. And often your budget board has to make decisions that take you in a new direction, particularly where budgeting is concerned. And with faith-based groups, there's always the added responsibility that you can show how you're a good steward of the resources you get, because that becomes critical to those donors. But by the same token, if you have some outside funding source like United Way or CHSP, they want to see the same thing. Are you effectively using the funds that you have? And so that becomes critical in those discussions as well.
Yeah. I think that might be an idea that we could have for another lunch and learn, just like talking about how does budgeting work within strategic planning and all that sort of thing, because we all have ideas about what we want to do and accomplish. Where are the resources for that? And we're kind of a limited pool of resources in Tallahassee. We're not a big metropolitan area like you might find for some of these agencies, were they in Orlando or Jacksonville or Miami. So limited access to a donor pool is something that has to be considered. But in any case, I will let you go. Thank you so much, Joe. We so appreciate this. And we'll let people know that the recording will be available. Would you like us to send you a copy, Joe, or link you to the copy?
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And thank you to all our attendees, of which we just have a few left right now. Thanks for hanging in there, people. And let us know if you need anything else from us. Thank you. Bye.